A judge's power is tested by one woman's relentless pursuit of justice. Secrets, lies, and a battle for accountability. Who will prevail? Pam Bondi stood in front of the courtroom, her voice calm, collected, but every word she spoke sent ripples through the room. The case had been building for months, but now it was real. Judge Jonathan Ross, a respected figure in the federal judiciary, stood accused of manipulating court decisions to protect political allies and misusing his position to shield individuals from federal scrutiny. It wasn't just any case. This was a reckoning. Pam didn't flinch under the scrutiny. She had always known this moment would come. The whisper campaigns, the behind-the-scenes manipulation, and the favoritism within the court system, it had all led to this. The Department of Justice had quietly built its case over time, but the final blow was one that would shake Washington to its core. Ross had been caught red-handed, yet his silence was deafening. Not a single statement from his camp, no press conference, no attempt to clear his name. Only legal jargon and polished defenses, everything that sounded too rehearsed, too safe. But Pam wasn't buying it. You can erase records. You can change schedules. You can hide behind your robes of power, she had told her team in the quiet hours of early mornings, but the truth always finds a way to come to light. Her words were more than just a mantra. They were a conviction, a call to arms. Behind her was the weight of the public's expectation, and that was more powerful than any legal defense Ross could mount. The public had begun to ask questions. Questions about the integrity of their justice system. Questions that, for years, had been left unanswered. Why had Ross been so untouchable? Why did his decisions seem to always favor certain people, people with connections, people with power? And when the time came for Bondi to make her public announcement, she spoke not just as a prosecutor, but as a representative of all those who had been overlooked and forgotten by the very system meant to protect them. The charges are simple, she began, her voice unwavering. Obstruction of justice. Misuse of judicial authority. Willful concealment of evidence. These aren't just violations of law. They're a betrayal of the people's trust. The very trust we depend on to make this system function. Outside the courtroom, the buzz was palpable. Reporters gathered. Whispers spread like wildfire. Bondi had taken on one of the most powerful figures in Washington, and it was unclear just how far this fight would go. But one thing was certain. She wasn't backing down. And Judge Ross, locked behind his silence, had no idea just how much damage was coming his way. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of courtroom drama, political backlash, and increasingly bizarre revelations. As Pam Bondi's office released new evidence, small but damning communications between Ross and various political figures, questions about the integrity of the federal judiciary reached a fever pitch. Each new piece of information only seemed to add fuel to the fire. There were texts, emails, and even covert meetings arranged to ensure Ross's rulings favored certain interests. But it wasn't just the damning evidence that made waves. It was the silence of Ross himself. He never spoke publicly, not once. No defense, no public statement to calm the storm, nothing. His legal team issued terse statements, but they were far from convincing. This is a political attack, they claimed. A vendetta against an honorable judge. But people weren't buying it. The press exploded with coverage, but what really caught Pam's attention were the stories coming in from all over the country. Ordinary Americans, veterans, small business owners, even former clerks, were speaking up. They weren't offering grand accusations, but what they said was telling. Quiet whispers of unfair rulings, of missing evidence, of political influence creeping into courtrooms in ways no one had ever imagined. Some of these accounts were vague, others more detailed, but the consistency in the stories was undeniable. Pam didn't need to hear more. She had already heard enough. Every whisper was another piece of the puzzle. Every story was a reminder that this wasn't just about Ross. It was about a system that had long been untouchable, a system that needed to be reminded that even those who wear the robes of power must be held accountable. But the media didn't stop there. They painted her as a hero in some circles, a villain in others. Some praised her for courageously tackling the untouchable, while others accused her of trying to politicize the judiciary. Still, the public reaction was more complex. There was a sense of unease among many Americans. For the first time in a long time, people were questioning the very institutions they had always trusted. In the midst of it all, Pam kept moving forward. She didn't respond to critics. She didn't need to. Every step she took was a step toward something bigger, something that wasn't just about a single man or a single case, but about the future of the justice system itself. The trial was slow, methodical, the courtroom filled with tension. On the day the charges were read, the courtroom felt like it held its breath. Ross, standing silently, listened as his fate was sealed in words. He pled not guilty, but everyone in that room knew it was never just about guilt or innocence. It was about something deeper, something far more profound. It was about whether the people could trust the system to protect them, or whether that trust had been broken forever. It was the day the verdict was delivered that Pam Bondi felt the weight of everything she had fought for. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. The judge presiding over the case read the verdict with careful precision. Ross was acquitted of some charges, including the most serious, due to lack of evidence. But 2 charges stuck: willful concealment of evidence and misuse of judicial authority. The courtroom held its collective breath. Ross stood motionless as the clerk finished reading. The room, filled with reporters, lawyers, and onlookers, remained eerily quiet. Ross's attorneys exchanged glances, but their expressions said it all. He would be stripped of his position. No jail time, but the loss of his career, his reputation, and his place in history. Pam, however, didn't look relieved. She didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. There was no joy in what had transpired, only a deep understanding of the significance of the moment. In the weeks that followed, public opinion remained divided. Some praised her for standing up to the system, while others accused her of overstepping. But the truth was undeniable. Pam had cracked open a door, one that many didn't even know existed. And now, the question wasn't just about Ross. It was about the system itself. People stopped arguing, at least for a moment. They didn't care about party lines or political ideologies. They started asking the hard questions. How many other judges, how many other officials were quietly making decisions behind closed doors, outside the public's view? How many had used their power for personal or political gain? And how many of those decisions had affected real lives? Pam Bondi knew this wasn't over. The real work had only just begun. In her office one quiet afternoon, she received a letter. No return address. The handwriting was shaky. A retired court clerk in Ohio had written it. I watched Judge Ross make decisions that weren't about justice. They were about power. And no one ever said a word. Pam didn't need to respond. The letter wasn't about making a statement. It was a sign. A reminder that the fight for transparency, for truth, for accountability had only just begun.